Are you looking for a more full-featured file explorer for Windows? Well, today we're going to take a look at some third-party alternatives to the Windows File Explorer. Stay tuned. The Windows File Explorer is an often overlooked component of Windows. While a file manager is a necessary component of Windows, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. That is until it changes and we have to relearn where everything is at. Yeah. But for the most part, one of the most used components of Windows typically gets the least amount of attention. Take our cell phones, for example. One of the first apps I typically install on a new cell phone is a file manager. And if you're on Android, there are a lot of options available. But what about Windows? Have you ever taken a moment to wonder if there's an alternative file manager for Windows? Well, that's what we're looking at today. I'm going to go over 5 alternative file managers for Windows. When I started searching for file managers for this video, I found tons of them. Enough to where I had to slim the list down a little bit because no one wants to watch a 2-hour video about file managers. So to slim this list down, I had a couple requirements for a file manager to qualify. The first requirement is it has to be free. Not just free to use for 30 days, but simply free. Another positive is that if it's open source, but not all the ones we're looking at are. And then the next criteria is it had to not suck right out of the box. There were a few that I installed and almost immediately uninstalled. I'm not gonna waste your time or mine adding those to the list. Now, I'm going to be doing this video on Windows 11 because first off, if it works on Windows 11, it will likely work on previous versions of Windows. And secondly, I already had Windows 11 loaded and I was just kind of being lazy. So let's jump on the system and I'll show you what I found. So the first file manager we're looking at today is FreeCommander XE. And I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description for all the file managers that we're using today. I'm thinking that this file manager is actually a clone of Total Commander, which is a retail product. Now this one here can be set up on your computer or it can be a portable app if you want. And that's definitely a plus, having it available as a portable app because you can keep this on a thumb drive and use it on anyone's computer. Unfortunately, this is only available in 32-bit. If you want the 64-bit version, you're gonna have to donate to them because they limit the 64-bit to only donors that have given to the project. One of the things that I noticed right off the bat that I didn't like about this one was the fact that there's no file tree by default. But it's relatively easy to turn on. All you gotta do is click this button right here and it'll give you the file tree. So it's not too hard, but by default, it kind of threw me off a little bit not having that there. You can also customize the toolbar, which is a good feature. So if you right click, you can define different actions for the toolbar if you want. And all these actions are typically available within the regular menu system itself, but if you want easy access to them, then this is an easy way to do it. Another thing about FreeCommander that I thought was a little strange is if you look right here, you see the search icon? This would suggest that that's for searching, right? But no, it's not. It just gives you the properties to the file that you happen to be highlighting at the time. If you want to search, you have to click right here on the binoculars. And by doing that, it opens up a pretty good search box. And actually, the search is pretty good on this one. It's definitely better than the default search that comes with Windows. Also, another thing on here is you have different ways to be able to configure your different icons. And you know, the thumbnails actually look pretty decent. But I noticed that the folder previews, I don't know if it's a bug or what, but they just don't look right. What I did is I went ahead and put a bunch of pictures inside of this one right here so you can kind of see, and unfortunately, it just doesn't look right. It looks kind of funny the way it sits right there. It doesn't display the contents of the folder the way that I think that it should. It just doesn't look right. Also, the address bar located down here at the bottom is just kind of strange, but I guess it works, but there's no way you can actually click onto the address bar to customize it. But you can come up here and you can click on the different folders here. So if you wanted to back down into another folder, you can just click on it here. However, it wasn't very intuitive and it doesn't seem like that's what it does, but you know, it does work. Another thing that was actually kind of important that I didn't realize was important until I started playing around with file managers is the ability to open up regular zip files. But I went ahead and made a temporary zip file here just so I can open it up. And this one can actually open it up and you can also view the contents, which believe it or not, in some of them, you really can't. Another thing that's kind of a little awkward is that you can drag and drop between tabs, which to open another tab, all you have to do is just double click here and you can open another tab. And it is nice that you have a whole other window here too. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I kind of like to get rid of this window anyway. And you can do that simply by grabbing this and sliding it over to the side, and that'll give you just a single window. And if you ever want to open it back up, you just have to grab it and slide it back in, and then you can have your dual windows again. But if you're just going from a single window, say you want to drag something from one tab to another, so in this one, I'm just going to go down into my desktop here, and then I'm going to drag one of these pictures onto my desktop. So to do that, you grab the picture, drag it over onto the tab itself, and then drop it. And as you can see right here, it's on my desktop now. And if we click over, you can see it right there on the desktop. However, it doesn't actually change tabs when you're dragging, which to me kind of seemed a little awkward. If you drag it, I would expect it to flip to that tab so you can drop it on it, but it didn't. But if you let go, it does seem to work. So it does do what it's supposed to do. It just does it in kind of an awkward way, I think. Another really cool thing is you can also delete files permanently on here. So let's go back to our desktop. So what we'll do is, in order to show this to you, I'm just gonna go ahead and create a file real quick. We'll go down to new, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of choices in here. It would be nice if you could create a new text file, but unfortunately you can't. So we're just gonna use a compressed zip file. So for the name, I'm just gonna call it delete, and then hit OK, and there it is right there. There's our new zip file. Now let's say we want to completely delete this. So to do that, all you got to do is select the file, go over to File, and then we want to click Wipe. And then from wipe, it has wipe file specifically. So make sure that it's the file that you want to wipe. So right here it says selected items is delete.zip, and we want to wipe them. So when we hit run, it'll go through and it'll completely delete that file. It doesn't throw it in the recycle bin, and it's unrecoverable. So you can never get it back again. So that is a nice feature if you want to eliminate files forever. And then if you're working with tabs, it's really easy to flip between the two tabs or close the tabs just by hitting the X. It works similar to the way that browser tabs work. So now that we looked at this, let's move on to the next one. So the next one we're looking at today is FreeCommander. And to be honest with you, this one almost got cut from the list because honestly, it's really ugly. This file manager is only available to be installed on a system. There is no portable version available. So just like the last program, by default, there is no file tree, which I'm not sure why programs are doing that. I think the file tree is really important, but you can turn it on. If you go up here to show, you can turn on the file tree, but it kind of cramps it in the corner right here, but that's okay. You can move your dividers around a little bit in order to orientate it the way that you want. But once the file tree is open, this is essentially just a basic tree. It doesn't support any of the Windows libraries or the common folders that you have. This is essentially just your drives, and that's it. I have access here to my network drives as well as my local drives. Now on this one, you can't actually disable the second pane, but like the other program, you can slide it over to the side. So if you just want a single pane, you can do it that way. And unfortunately, this program is just confusing to use. I mean, I played around with it for quite a while, and unfortunately, I just got lost in this thing because every time I tried to do something, I couldn't quite figure out how to do it, and I'd have to search around through the menus in order to do the things that I wanted to do. Like for instance, all of these buttons right here. These right here are your regular key commands that you would use in DOS, but to be honest with you, a lot of people don't know what those are. And so unfortunately, it's not really intuitive on how you go about using it. And also the forward and back buttons are just ridiculous. Like for instance, okay, let's go into here, let's go into desktop and say I want to go back, right? Well, you got to go up here and here's your forward and back buttons all the way at the top. And you know, that's just not a very intuitive way to do it, in my own opinion. And then another good example is the bottom right here. You got the address bar at the very bottom, but let's say I want to go to the desktop. So right now I'm in users rich and I want to open the desktop folder. So if I just type desktop, it opens it in File Explorer. I mean, what's the point in having an alternative file manager if it's just going to open File Explorer? It just doesn't make any sense, but okay. And then this one here, this is another problem that I had too. So let's go ahead and close File Explorer. We're going to open our desktop up this way. And here you can actually open compressed zip files within this file manager. However, if you try to actually open the files within the zip file, you essentially just get properties about the file. You can't actually open the file itself. And you know, that just to me seems a little weird, but it is what it is. And then another thing that was kind of weird. So let's go ahead and close this. I'm going to jump back to our desktop here, and then I'm going to open another tab. And then from this tab, I want to open up our pictures. And we're going to do the same test that we did in the last one. Now you can actually grab a file and drag it over to another tab and then drop it. It should go to that tab, but instead it wants you to copy it. It's like, I don't want to copy it. I want to move it to another tab. And unfortunately, I didn't see that setting around here, and it's just a little clunky in how this works. I don't want this dialog box. I just want it to do what I want it to do, like move a file from one folder to another. But apparently, it wants you to be a little bit more specific than that. And hey, that might be what you're looking for. And if it is, then this is the program for you. And also, another thing that I found really weird is closing tabs. There's no little X. You can't just close a tab. So what you have to do on this thing is you have to actually right click on the tab and then choose close tab in order to close it. And you know, why? Just put a little X next to the tab so that people can close them. It doesn't seem like it would be that hard. And you know, honestly, this program was just difficult to use. And to be perfectly honest with you, my favorite button in this whole program is this one right here. To just close it and save yourself the frustration. Don't download Double Commander. The next file manager we're looking at today is Dolphin. Now, if you're a Linux user, you're already well versed with this file manager because this is the default file manager in KDE. So this is going to be the file manager that you use on pretty much any KDE distribution of Linux. But I was surprised to find out that it's available for Windows. Now, unfortunately, that's only available to set up on Windows. You can't actually get this in a portable app, which would have been kind of cool, but you know, maybe down the road, maybe they'll make a portable app for it. Now, when it comes to the file tree, just to be fair, this file tree right here is more like just shortcuts to common places. You do have your drives down at the bottom, so you can go directly to a drive, but it's not a tree, so to speak. Essentially, all this is just a way to be able to move around the system with the most common folder locations that you would typically find. But that's the same way as it is in Linux, so none of that has changed. And another thing that I noticed, if you go into pictures, the image thumbnails just aren't working. Now, that might be a bug just in the program itself, but unfortunately, at the time of filming this, there are no image thumbnails. And then this one is also available in a dual panel mode just by hitting this button called split right here. And it will split it into 2 panels if that's what you're looking for. However, one of the downsides to this right here is if we, I'm gonna go ahead and close the dual panel real quick, go back to our desktop, and it will open zip files, but unfortunately it opens them in File Explorer. And another program that uses File Explorer. Why would we use an alternative file manager if we need our original file manager to use it? I don't know. So I guess since it opens this in File Explorer, you should be able to read the contents of the zip files just fine. Now you can actually go in, like for instance, just to be fair, if we go into the settings and we go into configure here and configure Dolphin, if you go into, I believe it's navigation. Yeah, you go into navigation and you go into general, it does say open archives as folder. And if we check that, then it should be able to open them. But unfortunately, when you click on it, it doesn't work. So the function is broken. That's probably why they're currently opening compressed files from within Windows File Explorer, because their function doesn't actually work. Another really neat feature on this is if you go down to the very bottom, do you see where the zoom is here? You can actually zoom in or out on the files themselves. Now, this would come in really handy if the thumbnails worked. Otherwise, all you're really doing is giving yourself bigger files and folders, which doesn't really make much sense, but you know, it's there if you want to use it. And just like Dolphin in KDE, you also have the free space available right here. So this is giving you the free space for the drive that you're currently in. However, if you click on this free space, it gives you a whole list of different apps and stuff like that that are available, and it even gives you the ability to install them right here from the app. It's just, unfortunately, these are all Linux apps that don't work in Windows. So I don't even understand why this feature was implemented other than it was probably left over from the Linux version of this and it was just left in when they compiled this for Windows, because there's literally nothing you can do with any of these programs right here from within Windows. So I guess it is what it is. So now when we go into the next thing, as you notice, there are no tabs in here, but tabs are available, but they're just not displayed unless 2 or more are open. So to get a tab, you have to come up to the 3 lines right here, click here, and you can create a new tab. And when you open a new tab, then you have all the tabs available. And then just to test like we have in other file managers, I'm gonna open my desktop here, and we're gonna try to drag a picture over to my desktop. So if we click on a picture, drag it over to desktop, it actually switches to the desktop tab. This is the way the other ones should function. Then you can drop it in here, and you can either move or copy, or you can even link here if you wanted to. So you can make a link to a file on your desktop if you want to. This is actually the best implementation of dragging from one tab to another that I've seen so far. So if we click move, it's obviously going to move it, and it takes it out of pictures and puts it on desktop. Same thing, if we go back, we can go to pictures, we can go move, and then it moves it back. So they did the best so far of implementing being able to move between tabs. And unfortunately, that was about the only best that this program had in Windows. But don't get me wrong, the Dolphin File Manager is a killer file manager in Linux. Unfortunately, it seems like Windows was an afterthought for sure, but it is what it is. I wanted to include it on the list because it's the file manager that I typically use on my daily system. I'm just not going to be using it in Windows, unfortunately. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next file manager we're looking at today is Explorer++. And this one's honestly a pretty decent file explorer. Now this one's not available as a program you can install in Windows. It's a portable app only, but you can always just throw it on your system somewhere and then leave a shortcut for it somewhere. But it's nice that you can throw it on a thumb drive and use it on any system you want. And unfortunately, like with the last file manager, like we looked at Dolphin earlier, it seems like the thumbnails are broken. If you enable your thumbnail view, like we're going to go to larger icons, it never actually shows you a thumbnail. It just shows you bigger icons, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. So for some reason, thumbnails are not working with previews. And then like the other ones, one of the things that I really like to test is its ability to be able to open zip files. And unfortunately, this one, if you try to open a zip file, it just opens them in File Explorer like many of the other programs does. However, it's just because it's disabled by default. If you go into Tools and then go into Options, and then from there, go into Files and Folders, you can actually open zip files right here. If you click this, hit apply and then OK. Now we're going to go ahead and open it. And unfortunately though, if you want to actually open something from here, like if I wanted to open a text document here, unfortunately it doesn't work. So that feature is actually broken. That's probably why the ability to open zip files by default is disabled, because it doesn't actually work the way it's supposed to. Now this one, unlike some of the other ones, this doesn't have a dual pane available. So you can't actually have 2 panes, but you do have tabs available. And you can create a new tab simply by clicking in the area right here to create as many tabs as you want. And unfortunately though, to close the tab, you got to go all the way over here to the right to the little red X. I don't understand why they couldn't just put a little red X right next to the tab itself. It doesn't make much sense, but that's the way they decided to do it. And then for another thing, let's go down to pictures again real quick, and we're gonna go test the drag and drop. So when you drag a file, you can drag it over to the other tab, and it does open the tab like I think it should, and then it copies just fine. And if you grab it, you can also drag it back to the other tab and copy it back to where you had it before. So that's the way that I think the dragging and dropping between tabs should work, and it does work that way in this app. And then finally, another thing that you can do in here is just like with other apps, is we're going to go back to our desktop and I'm going to create a new text document. And as you can see from this one here, it's actually using a more Windows-like right-click menu, which is kind of nice. And we can create text documents. So once we create a new document here, I'm going to show you how this one can also permanently destroy files, just like the other one we had a minute ago. And to do that, all you got to do is click on this little button right here in the tool menu that says delete permanently. And when you click on that, it asks you if you're sure, you hit yes, and it goes away. And this program claims that by doing that, you can't get that data back. It deletes it for good. It doesn't just throw it in the recycle bin. So for the most part, I actually kind of like Explorer++. This is definitely one that's on my short list, but let's move on to the next one. So the next file manager we're going to look at today is simply called Files. You can tell they definitely put a lot of thought into their name. And if you look at this actually looks a lot like a clone to the Windows 7 file manager. At least Windows 7 file manager if it had tab support. And also another thing is that this program right here is actually a Microsoft Windows app. It's not really a program, but it's an app, if you understand what I'm talking about. You don't have to install it through the Windows Store, but it installs as an app instead of a program. I'm not sure that they went that way, but I did notice that once you install it, it doesn't actually install with an icon. So I had to actually go onto Google, find an icon for it. This is its icon right here, and attach the icon to the shortcut, which, you know, that's something I'll have to show you how to do in another video. It's pretty easy to do though. And going back, let's go back to our desktop real quick. And one thing that I like to test is if we can open zip files. And by double clicking, it does in fact open zip files within this app. And you can also open the contents to those zip files from within the app as well, as you can see here. And if you go up to the address bar, this address bar looks a lot like the Windows 7 address bar. So if we want to go back to our desktop, you do it just like that, and it functions just like Windows 7 did. And then another test that we're definitely going to have to look at, because we've looked at it in the other file managers, is its ability to drag and drop between different tabs. So I'm going to grab a picture here, drag it over to the desktop, and it does switch tabs for you. And then you can drag down and drop into the other tabs. So the drag and dropping from tab to tab works pretty good in this program. Now, as you notice, is this one doesn't actually have different panels like the other ones have, but you can enable them. And to enable them, all you have to do is click on this little cog right here for settings. If you click on that, you want to go into multitasking, and then right here you can enable dual pane view. And by enabling that, it essentially just enables the feature. But now if you want to actually enable the pane itself, you have to go over here to these three dots, click here and hit new pane, and then it'll open a new pane on the side. I'm not sure why you have to go through so many different hoops in order to get it to function, but it is what it is. But either way, this is a very basic file manager. Doesn't have a ton of features, but it does resemble Windows 7 in a more modern way. And then another thing that I found really weird about this program is whenever you do a task, like you're going to copy something or you're going to move something, it doesn't actually show you a pop-up of what's happening. Like in Windows, when you move a large file from one location to another, it's going to show you a transfer dialog box. Unfortunately, this program doesn't. All you get is this little icon in the corner right here, and as you can see, there's a little check mark by it, and if you click on that, it gives you the ongoing tasks that are happening currently. Now, this is nice because it gives you a history of all the different tasks, but it would be nice if they had a file transfer dialog box that would show up when you move something from one thing to another. Because if you want to be able to look at how much time is remaining when you're moving a large file, you're going to have to go over here, click on this icon, and it'll show you in here what ongoing task is actually currently happening or whatever transfer is happening. And it'll give you the percentage completed in there when you do that. And to me, that just seems a little awkward to use, but as long as you know it's there, then you'll know how to get to it in the future. Now, this was just a brief overview of these file managers. If you'd like to know more about them, then I would recommend following the link in the description below and checking them out for yourself. All of these file managers were free, so the worst case scenario is that you hate it and you're out no money. Typically, when I do a list like this, I will mention which one I like the best. In this case, I didn't really have any preference. In fact, to be perfectly honest with you, I will probably continue to simply use Windows File Explorer. My daily system runs Linux, so I use Dolphin on KDE almost exclusively. However, the Windows version of Dolphin really isn't that great. It really does seem like making Dolphin work in Windows was an afterthought. I mean, the application literally has references to Linux-only apps that you can't install in Windows. But it wasn't a bad file manager. Double Commander, on the other hand, was just annoying, and I would end up giving myself a stroke if I had to use that as a default file manager in Windows. Sorry to the developers, but I simply hated it. So if you're just looking for a basic file manager without a lot of extra features, you can either stick with the Windows File Explorer, or you could use Dolphin, or even Files. Files was a really good file manager. However, if a more advanced file manager is more of what you're looking for, then FreeCommander and Explorer++ would be pretty good choices. But yeah, you know what? If you're looking to give yourself a coronary at a young age, then I highly recommend Double Commander. With all that said, if you would just like the Windows File Explorer in Windows 11 to look like it did in Windows 10, then check out this video where I make Windows 11 indistinguishable from Windows 10. You guys have a great day.